At the outset of his remarks on the economy earlier today, President Biden said, quote, "I am here to talk about solutions," end quote. But what he spent much of his time talking about, or more accurately attacking, was what he called the extreme agenda of MAGA Republicans. And he did acknowledge that he tastes our frustrations.
Look, I know you got to be frustrated. I know. I can taste it.
Well, joining me now to discuss those frustrations nearly 3/4 of the American people have with the president's policies is Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, who's a member of the Senate Budget Committee, the Banking Committee, and Armed Services Committee. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you, Tony. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so what flavor is the president tasting?
I shouldn't say on a family show because I think I don't even understand what he's talking about, to be honest with you. I think the one thing he lacks is empathy, and he's trying to portray empathy, but he doesn't get it. He clearly doesn't get it, either at an intellectual level or at an emotional level, I'm afraid. When you don't fill up your own tank, with gas, and you don't actually go to the grocery store, I just think you're not relating. At least he doesn't seem to.
No, I think the flavor's tutti frutti. I just don't think he gets it. But I want to get your reaction to the president's remarks today overall and what he laid out in terms of how he's going to get inflation under control. I personally, I thought it was very short on specifics.
Well, it was definitely that, but the biggest problem was that he was blaming everybody else, as he always does. For a long time, it was Vladimir Putin's fault. It was his predecessor's fault. Now it's MAGA Republicans' fault. And yet he forgets, or he doesn't understand, that it was his presidency, where when he became president, inflation was like 1.6%. Now it's 8.5%. That's happened while he's been president, and he refers to tax cuts as part of the problem. And as I recall, the Trump tax cuts and the regulatory cuts led to the strongest economy we've ever had, including job creation, including wealth creation, including improvements for the middle class. And the cutting of tax and the cutting of regulations are what unleashed an American energy renaissance that allowed us to be energy dominant and energy secure, which was good for our economy and good for jobs creation and good for national security, something he absolutely rejects every single day.
Now, Senator Cramer, you're a businessman, so to help me understand that, to bring down prices, you want to, the prices go up because there's scarcity. So what you want to do is you want to increase the supply. So if you're in a position of government, you don't make anything. You just you watch whatever other people make. I mean, it's really the private sector that drives the economy. But you can affect that by cutting regulations, cutting taxes, so that people produce more. That's what brings the prices down. What he's proposing is more government spending, higher taxes, and continued government regulation. How's that going to help supply and demand?
It won't. He's got the supply-demand curve completely upside down, to your point. Remember, it was only about 2 months or less than 2 months after he became president that he pushed through this $2 trillion giveaway program. He wanted so badly to be part of a giveaway program that he pushed the American Rescue Plan, which put fuel on the fire of inflation. He was warned about it. Several people warned him, including Democratic economists warned him about that. And then he, does just the opposite on supply side, squelches energy development, squelches the supply side of the economic equation. Right to your point. And on top of all of that, Tony, where he doesn't have regulatory authority, he sends messages, signals. He talks about potential regulations. He proposes regulations that'll probably never become final. All the while sending these messages to the investment community in the United States: don't invest here. Again, I just go back to the previous administration that he loves to blame. They didn't have this problem. They had exactly the opposite, because they put all the power back into the private sector by reducing regulations, reducing taxes, encouraging investment in the energy sector. And by the way, at the same time as the United States became the #1 producer of oil and gas in the world, we reduced emissions more than anybody else in the world. It's amazing how that works.
Senator, I want to talk about that because your state, North Dakota, an energy-producing state, the president, released and challenged other countries to release oil from their strategic petroleum reserves. We did that, but yet yesterday we hit another high on gasoline prices. So obviously that's not the answer.
Well, it's definitely not the answer because remember, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was filled up under the Trump administration when oil prices were really low. Now, with oil prices being really high, we have to replenish what he has taken out with higher priced oil. Completely backwards. And at the end of the day, Tony, when you look at places like North Dakota and Texas, New Mexico, Alaska, where there are vast reserves, you're better off, frankly, just giving the green light to the private sector producer who creates jobs and economic wealth for small communities, big communities, the nation. Let them produce from their reserves. You don't need a strategic reserve except for some sort of a national emergency, a natural disaster, or war on our own country.
And that's what it's supposed to be there for, not to offset bad policy choices that an administration may make. I mean, what we need right now is to open up the exploration and the pumping of oil. But the president, as a footnote to everything he says regarding energy, it's very clear he's trying to move the country toward this green agenda.
He is, and the problem is much of what he's trying to do, he won't be able to do because of his own green agenda. Take, for example, they want to push us all to electric vehicles. Remember, in the Build Back Broke plan, they proposed a $12,500 per electric vehicle subsidy, a subsidy that would go to the producers. It wouldn't go to the people buying the cars. It just adds to the price of the electric cars. But they do nothing to bring back the supply chain that would create the batteries, for example. Now, he's talked about that, about critical mineral mining in the United States, while he's shut down critical mining mines in the United States. At the same time, his environmental policies run up straight against his economic policies because, again, I just think they don't have a fundamental understanding of what motivates the private sector.
I think you're absolutely right. A final question for you. We're up against the break, Senator Cramer. But the president, I've noticed the use now, the Democrats are starting to use the term MAGA Republicans. It appears that they've pulled that, and that's something that they see as a pejorative toward conservatives.
I noticed that, and it's peculiar, really, because first of all, I doubt many people outside of the real political activists even know what he's talking about. But for those who do, I think it's a term of endearment for the most part. Wouldn't we love to go back to the Make America Great Again days when inflation was 1.4% instead of 8.5%, or the cost of gasoline, the cost of food, the cost of everything was less, where people were making more money, where the middle class was growing instead of the gap between the rich and poor getting wider, when the nation was secure before Russia dared to invade its neighbor Ukraine, and the southern border was actually managed, and where we had an agreement with Mexico, and where things were going back to the way America used to be and the way we'd like America to be again. So if he's hoping to tap into some sentiment, I think he's missing the boat.
Well, Senator, that's a good recap of the last 4 years. It's exactly what we were looking at. Senator Cramer, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Tony.